Hi everyone, this is my biofuel project, and the biofuel I chose was sugarcane ethanol. So before we can start to understand what is sugarcane ethanol, we first need to understand what biofuels are as a whole. So, biofuels are renewable fuels derived from biological materials and are categorized into four generations. So, the fourth generation is recent, which is why I didn't write it down on my slides, but it is included. It is more research, though. It's not really practiced. The first and second and third are more practiced, but the fourth one is kind of just like how the future is looking. So, I do want to talk about it. So, the first generation biofuels come from food crops like corn and sugar cane, while second generation use non-food biomass like crop residues and wood. And third generation biofuels are made from algae, and fourth generation, which is the one I told you is more researched rather than practiced, is involved in advanced technologies like genetically modified organisms and carbon capture to create a substantial biofuel. So, now that we know kind of the background of what biofuels are, we can begin to talk about specifically sugarcane ethanol as a biofuel. So, to be able to understand, we first need to know what sugarcane ethanol is. Sugarcane is a first generation biofuel derived from the fermentation of sugars and sugarcane juice. So, I'll be explaining what fermentation is later on, but as of right now, what is important to understand is that sugarcane ethanol is widely harvested mostly in Brazil, and that it is highly efficient and sustainable. So, how do we grow it? Or what are the most important things to grow in it? And so I have location and photosynthesis. So they kind of go hand in hand with each other, but to be able to choose a location, we need to understand photosynthesis. So as it shows, photosynthesis is basically the three things we put in, or the three things that plants take in to create food. So kind of like how we eat food, we break that down and turn that into energy. Is the same way plants take in light and carbon dioxide and water to make their own energy, right? So obviously, in order to do photosynthesis, as the picture shows, you need light, carbon dioxide, and water. So when we're choosing a location to be able to do this, we're gonna need a large space area, and we're gonna where light hits, water hits, and there's a lot of carbon dioxide. So how is sugarcane ethanol produced? It is important to understand that sugarcane ethanol isn't just a simple process. It goes through several steps to make. First is harvesting and crushing. So that basically means is when it is fully grown and ready to harvest, it is cut down and then it's transported. It is transported to get crushed. And the reason they crush it is so they can secrete the juice that is inside the sugarcane. So after it's crushed and we get the juice, we then have to ferment it. And this is where we have to understand what fermentation is. Fermentation basically is another method or another way that our cells are able to create fuel or energy. Well, not create energy because we cannot create energy. We can just transfer it. So don't kill me. But basically, just another way to get fuel for the body or the plant in this case. But basically, fermentation is the breakdown of glycolysis. So we break down glycolysis, which is glucose, into pyruvate, and then pyruvate is then transformed into acetaldehyde. It's converted, and when it's converted, then we can convert that acetaldehyde into ethanol, which is what we want. We want ethanol. This is called sugarcane ethanol. But basically, after we've fermented it and we've gotten our sugarcane ethanol, now what we need to do is distill it. So the reason we go through distillation is because the ethanol we get out of fermentation isn't pure. So we need to purify it through distillation. But when we purify it, there's still a lot of water in it that we need to remove because if with that all that water, we're not able to mix it with other gasoline, which basically means it's useless. We can't use it as a fuel for our cars, buses, or anything like that. So we dehydrate the water and we get rid of all of it. That way we can mix it with gases. Now, it is important to understand that after crushing and all it, there's an important leftover called bagasse. Bagasse is basically some fibrous material left over that we can use to burn, and it can be used to recycle and it helps the whole process start all over. So it is incredibly efficient because it can grow itself. It's sustainable. So, impact on the carbon footprint. Well, it sugarcane ethanol has a significantly lower carbon footprint than fossil fuels. What I've learned is it reduces GHG emissions by 60 to 90% compared to gasoline. Also, the use of bagasse, which I explained, was how we're able to like refuel and use that to produce, I mean, to harvest more, is an energy is a use of the use of it makes the reliance on fossil powered electricity during production. So basically use less of it to be able, I mean, we use less fossil fuels because we're able to sustainably produce sugarcane and sugarcane and secrete ethanol out of it. And also, not only is it not feeding into the problem of carbon emission, but it's also helping it. Sugarcane absorbs carbon dioxide during its growth, which partially offsets emissions from combustion. Economic impacts. So, sugarcane ethanol is widely grown, mostly in Brazil. And in Brazil, it has by itself employed over 800,000 people. Not only that, it also contributes to energy independence and rural economic development. This means that they don't have the town, let's say, that creates this sugarcane ethanol can depend on this energy without having to depend on others, which means rural economic development. So more like, because usually where these are grown is a more rural area, so they can depend on this source of energy. And also, it helps balance trade by reducing fossil fuel imports. So, most of the time, when it comes to trade, especially with the US, Europe, and Asia, they're trying to trade for other fuels, which in most of the cases it's fossil fuels because that's the most amount. But when you introduce something like this into the market, countries like the US, Europe, and Asia are going to be interested in buying this, which reduces the amount of fossil fuels being bought, which is better for our atmosphere. And fourth is the economic value, which goes hand in hand with the people, with the amount of jobs it provides. So, public communication and engagement. How has Brazil, the main distributor of sugarcane ethanol, been able to incentivize the usage of sugarcane ethanol? Well, they've done it through incentives, labels, and awareness campaigns. So it gives government incentives and subsidies for flex fuel vehicles. Flex fuel vehicles are basically the vehicles that can use the gasoline from the ethanol in sugar canes, in the sugar canes produced. And it incentivizes people to use those vehicles because you get government incentives, which is money. And second is labeling at gas stations. So it basically shows the environmental benefits at gas stations, which is where you go to get gas for your car. And it can teach people, maybe I want to do this to help the atmosphere. And then third, there is public awareness campaigns. So basically, there are campaigns that emphasize energy independence and climate benefits. So after doing research and learning a lot about the practice of growing sugarcane ethanol, it based off what I can see is it is incredibly sustainable, valuable for the economy, really good for jobs, and best of all, small carbon footprint. The recommendations I would have if I was to talk to the person who distributes this would be these three main things. It'd be expand, which by what I mean by expand, it would mean teach other people how to, I mean, to expand would mean to like to trade with more people rather than just your big countries like that. Trade to everybody so that smaller countries don't have to only depend on fossil fuels. And then share expertise. So not only expand trade, but also teach other countries how to do this, how to grow it, how to use it. And then third, tighter sustainability practices. So I have seen that there are not the best sustainability practices. And what I mean by this is, so obviously we need a large area to be able to grow a large amount of sugarcane. This can only be done if we cut down trees. Now, A lot of the times, this causes what we know as deforestation. But if we tighten sustainability practices, this means every tree we cut down, we grow three more. This would mean we would be fine. We wouldn't have to worry so much about cutting down trees because we're growing more because of it. And if we didn't have to worry about, or if I didn't have to worry about funding, these are the five things I would do to expand ethanol. I mean, sugarcane ethanol production, or technically harvesting. One would be global expansion, which is build ethanol plants in countries with sugarcane potential. So those would be India, Thailand, and sub-Saharan Africa. Second would be infrastructure development, so create an international distribution network for sugarcane ethanol. Third, second generation ethanol scaling. So invest heavily in converting sugarcane waste into biofuel. So use that biofuel waste that we got to be able to create more and more and more and more. Fourth would be innovations. This basically just means that process of fermentation that we go through, find ways, do research that can make it more efficient. And then fifth would be global education campaigns, which is launch worldwide public campaigns on sustainable ethanol to promote adoption. So we want more people to do this because it's not only good for the environment, it's also good for the economy. So we would launch global education campaigns to make people more aware. And these are my citations and images I used. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you have a good day.